This week I learned one should always beware the Ides of March. Hey, what's up, bookworms? Mike back with another weekly update and a happy Ides of March to you if you do celebrate. Been a interesting week here on the channel. I have to say, much more pleasant than last week was, but we're going to kind of talk about that as with all things before and after. Let's begin like usual, guys, talking about what am I reading. I did finish The Third Rule of Time Travel by Philip Fracassi. Now, what I will say about this, guys, is if you go into this expecting, because I've told people, hey, it feels like a love letter to Michael Crichton, Blake Crouch, things like that. If you go into this expecting the hard science like you might get in a Michael Crichton novel, you'll probably be a little disappointed. This isn't Timeline. He isn't going to go into the math of making you understand, well, you know what, this actually feels like time travel is possible, like Michael Crichton could do. But with this, I think it very much feels much more in the vein of a Blake Crouch or like an Andy Weir in that it's science, it's approachable for the everyday person. Me, I don't have a PhD in quantum physics, so I appreciate that. And I think what I really dug about this is it is very much in that techno-thriller style in that you've got this big, crazy scientific event happening, but it makes you think about the things that really matter, like family. And I think that's something that Blake Crouch has just become the master of, is he'll always have this great scientific breakthrough that might be right around the corner. Maybe you shouldn't be messing with it. But in the end, all that really does matter is, family and loved ones and certain things that we need to focus on. And it isn't preachy in that way. I want you to understand that isn't it. It's just showing that you always think this is the end of the world event. And then you realize, I will take that end of the world event over losing family members. And Beth really goes to the ringer with her past in this book. And I really appreciated how he played with the time travel rules here, because everything seems like it is bound to some kind of time travel rules. I think he kind of creates his own here. And I admire him for doing that. So I said I was going to read anything that he wrote after Boys in the Valley, and I'm happy to do so. And I'm happy to say I will continue to read more by this. But it is very much more thriller than it is a hard sci-fi book. So if you go into it with that attitude, I think you won't be disappointed with it. I also started and finished Paper Towns by John Green. Now, this is my first John Green book. If you guys missed the memo, you've come along recently. My wife and I are going to a John Green signing here on the 26th. And I didn't, I never read John Green before. That's something she's a fan of. And I said, well, I want to read at least one of his books before we go. And I picked Paper Towns, and I was very happy with it. Now, look, what I'll say about Paper Towns is the whole story between Quentin and Margot was okay. What I really loved about the book was the way that he wrote the three teenage boys. You got Quentin, you got Ben, and you got Radar. The way he wrote those three, like the dialogue, phenomenal. Perfect. For me, it's like growing up as a teenage boy. I think that if you are not writing the way that you're writing the Dawson's Creek format where these kids are walking around with a source in their pockets, that isn't how teenage boys talk to each other. This nailed the way that teenage boys talk to each other. Now, these three kids aren't the same generation as mine, but I think there's some things that aren't bound to generation, and that's just how stupid teenage boys can act around one another, and it doesn't really need an explanation. He really captures that well. I loved that friendship between the three of them. And I think that with me, it's any kind of coming of age story. It really relies on the dialogue. And I felt like the dialogue was very believable. And yes, these are the way that teenage kids talk to each other, both boy and girl. I thought it was really well done. And I was very happy to take that trip because it was a very quick book. And it did have some profound things in it. And it was one of those things where you think, okay, well, that might be a little bit above my pay grade in understanding where this person's coming from. Like, look, I'm not the big poetry expert. I admired the way that he wrote Walt Whitman into this, but as far as like deciphering that, look, I'll read some poetry that isn't Edgar Allan Poe, and I'll be like, I'm not quite sure what it's trying to tell me there. So I might not be the one to kind of get to there, but the whole like mystery of it, unraveling things. If you like a good mystery kind of a scavenger hunt, I will say I was worried this was kind of leaning in that 13 Reasons Why direction. And if you've seen or read 13 Reasons Why, you know what I'm talking about. I never read it. I watched the first couple episodes on Netflix. I was like, no, it's too heavy for me. But I was fearing that it was kind of going that. It does something totally different. And I don't think that you're going to, leave with a major depression after you read this book, like maybe some of John Green's other books, more famous books. But with this one, I think it will give you, some of those nostalgia feels of life in high school and just kind of getting up to just the absolute buffoonery that we did, especially the pre-smartphone age. I think that just shows, it really captures how just we had nothing to do with our time. And I think it really does capture that well, and I enjoyed my trip to the paper towns. How about what am I going to read here? Now, the reason I picked up Paper Towns, guys, because I started Relic of the Gods, and this is book 3 in the Echo saga, and I got about this far into it, and I'm going to be straight with you here. There's nothing wrong with this book. Nothing at all. I think that Mystic River, which we'll talk about here in a minute, I think Mystic River broke me a little bit, and broke me in a way that, like, anything that's like epic fantasy right now I'm having a tough time with. That's why I've read a few smaller books after I've read Paper Towns now, and I read Third Rule Time Travel, because they're a little bit smaller, I think. This, I was getting into it, and it's talking about so many characters and factions and prophecies and all these major reveals, and I was like, it's just kind of too much for me at the moment. And I really think it's just because Mystic River really just left me with a bit of a book hangover, and that happens from time to time. I think when I did Shogun last year, I absolutely loved it, but it did give me a book hangover, or it's hard for me to get into any other expansive worlds or whatever. So that's why I decided to take a break and read Paper Towns, but I'm hoping I will get back on this sometime this week. But again, I want you to understand, there's nothing wrong with this book. I've had other people who did Mystic River and did this right afterwards, and they were like, I was having a tough time getting into it, but more so because of the book hangover that Mystic River left me with than the whole fantasy setting that we put up here. So again, I'm going to be getting back into that this week. I don't think I'm having fantasy burnout or anything like that. I think I just kind of needed to let things settle a little bit before I got a world that expansive again. And that's why this week I'll be reading that, but I'll also be probably going ahead and starting this. This is coming out, I think, on Tuesday, and I have a review copy, and I need to probably get to that. I need to start getting into some of these before they release, I do think. I'm going to try to do that. Now, I did the Philip Fracassi one on time. This one I probably won't be starting and finishing before Tuesday, but this will be my first Stephen Graham Jones, and I'm anxious to see how it does go here, because it's an author I hear a ton about, both good and bad, and it'll be interesting to see kind of where I fall on it. So I'll be kind of reading a fantasy and a horror book concurrently to hopefully help me if I'm still struggling with fantasy this week, because all I've got left is that one and the Larry Correa one of the next Lonesome Dove book, which is the Dead Man's Walk. I think it's Dead Man's Walk, and we'll get into that probably the end of the month. I think that's kind of where I stand right now. How about this week on the channel, guys? I did get a few things out. I did that book haul for February, which was quite fun, because all the comments are about how I'm wrong about the Kobo. All my Kindle videos were always, hey, you got to try Kobo. It's much better. Now that I've gotten a Kobo, it's all about how, well, you're stupid. You weren't ever going to own your books anyway. So that's an argument for another time, I think. I think we'll be having that argument here very, very soon. But a book haul for me is always just a way to say thank you to authors and publishers and viewers who are kind enough to send me things. I think, again, I don't understand why you would think of me when you are purchasing something, but I'm so thankful for it. I think it's just a blessing I'll never ever stop saying thank you for. You guys are the best. I had an idea for a video that I thought would be more popular than it turned out being. It turns out that fantasy readers do love magic, and this one just didn't do very well. I did a video called Fantasy for Readers Who Hate Magic. And it was just kind of some low magic books. Like, I'm very much a soft magic guy. I'm really tired of exhaustive magic systems that are basically their own character. And I feel like I'm sitting through some kind of physics class to understand your magic system, and I don't want to do that. So I thought I'd present some books that, were low magic, soft magic, no magic, and, are still in a fantasy setting. Again, I thought it was a really good topic, but it's one of my lowest engagement videos I put out this year. Like, not just in views, but you look at like the average duration watch, it's like 4 minutes, which is incredibly low for me. So I think some people checked it out and they were like, nah, that's not for me. Yeah, fantasy readers mostly love magic, and in the era of Brandon Sanderson, everybody really loves high magic, and I get that. So that's kind of a small niche of the fantasy reader community, I think, and I get that. But like I said, I thought that would be more of an interesting topic. But hey, you swing and you miss sometimes. That one was clearly a miss, but I still recommend all those books for you guys, whether you like magic or don't. They're all really great books. I talked about Mystic River there for a second. We had our ℙ𝕦𝕤𝕤𝕤 discussion over on John's channel, Talking Story. We did talk there for, I say, about 15 minutes, spoiler-free. We announced the next book that we'll be reading in quarter 2, which is my pick. And then we also just did about 40 minutes of spoilers and lots of cutting up and lots of, it's live, baby, so lots of goofy things. I think I almost choked on my own spit one time, so that was really awesome. So if you want to see me really screw up, watch one of those live streams. It's always a wild card. You never know. But I love talking with those three gentlemen, Brian and Philip and John. Beautiful human beings. Could talk to them about anything, and the fact that we got to talk about a book that I loved so dearly was a lot of fun, and I can't wait to talk about the next one because those guys are really awesome, and being able to talk about really great books, it's something you never really get tired of. I love talking like this to you guys, but when you have someone to talk back to, it's always fun. I came up in podcasting, so it's always fun to have others to talk to, and those three gents, I am ride or die with those guys. A lot of fun over there. I'll be talking with two-thirds of those other gentlemen. I'll be talking with Philip and John today over on Philip's channel. That's going to be with Christopher Navo and the author, Ryan Cahill. We'll be talking about Ryan's book of War and Ruin. This was a series that we started a while back, doing spoiler discussions of those books. We kind of took a break. Christopher kind of stepped away from BookTube for a while, and now he's back, and we're going to do the video of War and Ruin, and Ryan is going to join us on there and talk spoilers for that book. He wrote an exhaustive recap for it, which I've got to read right after I finish recording this, so I'm prepared for that video today. So if you're watching this later, the video will be on Philip's channel. It's live today, but obviously you can catch up whenever you want. If you haven't read the book yet, hey, please do, and come over there and listen to it and get some things straight from the dragon's mouth, as Ryan will be joining for that. I'm sure he'll be talking a little bit about the next book in the series, which is going to be of Empires and Dust, which I actually did get, and we'll talk about that here in a second. But it's exciting times when you get a chance to talk to the author of any series. As for next week plans, guys, got a couple things. Hopefully they do resonate with the audience a little bit more. Something that I get a ton is just recommendations. You run a BookTube channel, you're getting lots and lots of recommendations, and there's some that are just repeat. You get a lot. I really think you should check this out. And I always talk about FOMO and things like that. Sometimes it's just like, that doesn't sound like something I'd like, but I hear it enough. I get something recommended enough from multiple viewers and people whose opinions I trust. They've been right in the past. I started to take note of that. So I think I'm going to just talk about some most recommended books that I get from viewers. I've done videos like this before for series and things like that, but this will be just for anything, series, new books, anything that I get just recommended a ton. Going to kind of talk about some of those, put a spotlight on some of those, and see if I get further influence to read some of those soon. I think you'll be surprised with some that are on there. Some maybe not so much because they're just so super popular. Or you follow me on Instagram, you see some of the books that I'm buying, and you can see there's some things that are going to be coming soon. I've got a lot of people asking me now, as I showed you guys a minute ago, the first book that I put on the new Kobo was the arc of the new book from Ryan Cahill here. A lot of people have been asking me, have you started using that yet? This is the first book I put on here. So I finally got this set up, and I'll be using it here for this week. And I'll be using it for several things to kind of get to see how the device works, how I think about it, how it compares with multiple different versions of the Kindle, and I'll be doing that review. So basically it's going to be more of like a making the switch from Kindle to Kobo and kind of like a comparison thing. And then maybe I'll do like a 6 months later thing, which might be more of a review after I've gotten to know the device a little bit better. So let me use it for a little while, see what I think about it, and then I'll make that video. Hopefully I can get up this week, just my initial thoughts. Like I said, more focusing on making the switch from Kindle to Kobo, and then maybe a full-on review later. I'm not sure. It's just kind of up in the air. Maybe I might get enough of it and say, hey, I've seen all the bells and whistles. I feel like I'm ready to review it now. But I'm going to get something up for that this week because I'm getting so many people asking me because they are curious about making the switch themselves. I want to be able to provide them good feedback for that. That's all I got for the books, guys. Got a couple of TV and movie talk things before I go. A movie that I love from the late 90s is Starship Troopers. It's an absolute riot of a movie. It's one of my favorite science fiction movies ever. And wouldn't you know, it's been 20-something years. It's time for a remake, right? Well, here's the thing, is that movie is not really faithful to Robert Heinlein's book, like at all. It's actually, Verhoeven was not a fan of the book. So the movie was very much a satire. Somehow it worked. Both the book and the movie are very good, but they're very different. So Sony has gotten the rights to this, and they think, well, you know what we can do is we can hire Neil Blomkamp, who is Blomkamp? I'm not sure I'm saying his name right. He made District 9, but he also made Chappie, which was not that good, and Elysium, which was a big kind of a disappointment. But obviously, he's a sci-fi director with a vision, and I can admire that. Still wish we had gotten his Halo version than that Paramount shit that we got. Anyhow, so they can hire him and they can say, hey, well, we're wanting to be more faithful to Robert Heinlein's book. These all sound like great things, right, to a book reader. Well, I have no trust in Sony whatsoever. I feel like this is one of those segments where it's like, if my mama taught me if you can't say anything nice, I don't trust Sony. I mean, Warner Brothers trust is like here and Sony somewhere down here. It's like the only thing that they've done right, I feel like, was sharing the rights to Spider-Man. That was like the only thing they've done right. And they had to have someone else kind of help them make that into a profitable series again. Back when I had the media podcast before I started this, I used to basically weekly just rail on Sony. Because if you remember the Sony leaks, the email leaks, you saw how incompetent leadership is over there. So do I have any faith in this? None whatsoever. None at all. So again, I don't really want to talk about it too much because I'll just start flaming it, and I'll leave that for better creators than me because that's not like my style or whatever. But you can see that a lot of people are not happy about this. And usually, in most cases, it'd be like, oh, they're going to do it more faithful to the book. This didn't need a remake, and it's going to fail miserably, mostly because of Sony's attachment to it. I just do not trust them. Hey, prove me wrong, Sony. I would love to be proved wrong. I'd love to have a really good adaptation of that book because I felt like it had a really good message. I just fear it's going to be way too preachy because I'll be honest, the book's kind of preachy. It was very much a commentary on the Vietnam War. I don't know. I'm just not very excited about this. And I just love that original movie so much. And it's weird to say, hey, don't remake a movie that wasn't faithful to the source material. As a book fan, it feels really weird to say that. But it's just big shoes to fill. It's like them remaking Harry Potter. Why? Why are you doing that? It's just dumb. Anyhow, watched some horror movies with my oldest son. We were just kind of flipping around one night, and what can we check out? He's gotten older now where he can watch some scary, basically everything except Saw he's been fine with. Like The Shining didn't bother him at all. Pet Sematary didn't bother him at all. Nightmare on Elm Street, whatever. No big deal. No big deal. Saw messed him up a little bit because he kind of has like a little bit of a fear of dolls. But he watched Megan, and he liked that. So he said, hey, how about Chucky? Let's watch some Chucky. So we watched Child's Play #1, and he was fine. I think that with Chucky he's so funny and amusing. He's very much like Freddy Krueger in that way, that his one-liners were just great, that it never really feels the part where you're just like super scared. Now, we watched Child's Play 1. The thing is, I expected this to age a lot worse than it has. I thought, I haven't seen this in 20-something years, at least. I think this is probably going to be pretty painful to watch. It's actually pretty good. It's actually aged quite well. Like the way that Chucky's facial movements and stuff are really good. You're never just like laughing at like how ridiculous. Like even the Annabelle movies, they never really show her move, because they feel like they can't do it in a way that's believable. But using the practical effects, obviously, it made it look really good. It's aged very well. Now I feel like with the Child's Play franchise is like the first one's the only one that tries to be scary. Then they realize, you know what? Chucky and Brad Dourif, who voice him, have so much charisma. So we're just going to kind of embrace that. And he does very much become like the Freddy Krueger model, where he becomes the focal point of the series, not the protagonist. And it's basically what ridiculous kill can he have? What crazy one-liners? What kind of self-aware, shitty attitude comment can Chucky make? And honestly, that's all I need in a Child's Play movie. So I bought that box set that's got all the movies in it. Now, I've never seen past Bride of Chucky. I think the others went direct to video. But some of my horror friends have said they're actually quite good, much better than they needed to be, honestly. And they said that the TV series has been really, really good, too. So for me, like I said, as long as you got Chucky there just being Chucky, I'll watch it. It's got my attention. But we're going to watch Child's Play 2, which in my memory was my favorite one out of all of them. And I'm hoping that he's on board to keep going with them. Because like I said, I did buy that box set that's got all 7 movies in it. Yes, 7. But like, I didn't know there was 7 of them. Yes, and it does not have that crappy 2020 remake or whatever where they had used a CGI Chucky and wonder why it failed. Anyhow, it's a franchise I always had a soft spot for a little bbit. I mean, I love 80s, 90s horror. It's always something I'm going to be into. And looking back on it sometimes with nostalgia glasses, it's easy to say, it's pretty bad, but I still enjoy it. I was kind of blown away by how good the first one still looked. And I'm hoping that I feel the same about 2. Before it really just completely embraces the camp, goes just all the way in with Bride of Chucky, which I enjoyed. I enjoyed quite a bit. But it's been an interesting experience. As for some family movie night, we did finish the How to Train Your Dragon trilogy. Now, my kids have watched this dozens of times. It's my first time watching How to Train Your Dragon 3. And what I'll say about it is, like, my kids had me prepared. Like, they gaslit me a little bit. They had me prepared to be like emotionally assassinated. Like they were telling me it was like on Toy Story 3 level of emotional trauma. And like it was touching at the end, but I felt like it was mostly happy. So I was like, you know, I ended with a grin on my face. I enjoyed it, but I wasn't. I mean, maybe it's because I put that guard up so much because, you know, Toy Story 3, it was like one step away from embarrassing myself with like a wailing cry in the theater when I saw Toy Story 3. So no, it didn't get any tears out of me, but I was very happy with how it ended, and I give them respect for ending it where they did, because I think that franchise, they could have kept it going for years. You know, they could have had 7 or 8 of these movies, and they actually ended and walked away where they did, telling a full story. Normalize the trilogy again. This isn't just books. With movies, normalize the trilogy again. I want this. I want us to go back to ever since they started doing this. Okay, well, it's a trilogy we're going to adapt, but we're going to make the last book part 3 and part 4. I feel like it just kind of went away from trilogies for good since then. So I know that they're doing like the live action remake and things like that. My kid wants to see it, clearly. But I can see why my kids really enjoy this so much. And I feel like that is a great, I'm telling them the whole time I watch this, I'm like, buddy, you know, this is like every fantasy series that I read right now. So I'm hoping that maybe someday this could be the gateway to them trying to read some epic dragon fantasy. I think it would be just a home run for him. He finds right here. I think he's getting right to the age where he could probably read Aragon and enjoy it. And I'm hoping that that does happen. So guys, that was my week. I would love to know what your week is like. What are you up to? What are you watching? What are you reading? What are you listening to? What are you playing? Why don't you drop in the comments, guys, and let me know, and I will talk to you there.